The loyal dog who kept staring at the storm drain what they found inside shocked everyone. James Holloway had lived in Maplewood, a small, quiet town, for most of his life. As a retired firefighter, he enjoyed his peaceful days, often sitting on his porch with a hot cup of coffee, watching the world go by. He'd always had a soft spot for animals, especially dogs, which is why he had noticed the strange behavior of a stray dog that wandered through the neighborhood every day. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The dog, a shaggy brown mutt with soft, intelligent eyes, had no collar, no home, and yet he seemed determined about one thing every single day. He would stop at the storm drain on Maplewood Avenue, peer inside, and whimper. At first, James thought nothing of it. Maybe the dog was just curious, or maybe he was looking for food. But as days turned into weeks, the dog's obsession with the drain didn't stop. He would sniff around it, bark occasionally, and even scratch at the metal grate, as if begging someone to open it. James wasn't the only one who noticed. Margaret, his neighbor, a retired schoolteacher, often saw the dog too. "That poor thing," she murmured one afternoon, standing beside James. "Do you think he's looking for food down there?" James shook his head. "I don't think so. There's something about the way he acts. It's almost like he knows something's in there." The day that changed everything. One rainy afternoon, the stray was at it again, sitting beside the storm drain, staring into it. The pitter-patter of rain soaked his fur, but he didn't move. Something about his sad, determined eyes struck James. He couldn't shake the feeling that the dog was trying to tell them something. Curiosity got the better of him. Grabbing an old crowbar from his shed, James made his way to the drain, his boots splashing in the forming puddles. The dog perked up as soon as he saw him, wagging his tail excitedly, as if he knew James was finally paying attention. James knelt down and peered inside the darkness of the storm drain. At first, all he could see was rushing rainwater running through the pipes, but then a sound. A faint, desperate cry. His breath caught in his throat. Had he imagined it? No. There it was again, a weak, pitiful sound, almost like a whimpering baby. "Margaret!" he called out. "Come quick!" She hurried over, umbrella in hand, her face lined with concern. "There's something down there," James said, his voice firm, "and I think it's alive." A shocking discovery. With trembling hands, James wedged the crowbar under the rusted grate and pushed with all his strength. The metal groaned in protest before finally popping loose. The dog jumped up, tail wagging frantically, barking as if urging him to hurry. James took out his flashlight and shined it into the drain. At first, there was only darkness, but then his light caught something small and trembling in the shadows. A pair of tiny eyes blinked back at him. James felt his heart stop. "Oh my God," Margaret gasped, covering her mouth. It was a puppy. No, not just one. 2, 3, 4 tiny puppies, all huddled together, soaked and shivering in the cold water. Margaret's eyes welled up with tears. "They're just babies." James didn't waste a second. He carefully climbed down, his old firefighter instincts kicking in as he balanced himself in the narrow space. One by one, he scooped up the fragile little bodies, their fur matted and damp. As he handed them up to Margaret, the stray dog who had never left their side began licking them frantically, whining softly. And then it hit James. "This is their mother," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She's been waiting here, every day, watching over them, hoping someone would find them." The mother's sacrifice. The realization hit Margaret just as hard. The stray dog who they had assumed was just another lonely pup on the streets had actually been a desperate mother trying to save her babies. "She must have given birth near here and somehow they fell into the drain," James muttered. And she couldn't get to them. For weeks, the poor mother had waited, trusting that someone, anyone, would notice. And James had a second chance at life. James and Margaret rushed the puppies to the vet, along with their brave mother, who refused to leave their side. The vet confirmed what they feared: the puppies were malnourished and weak, but thanks to their mother's determination, they had survived. James knew what he had to do. "I'm not letting them go back on the streets," he said firmly. They deserve better. So, he adopted them all. Margaret, laughing through her tears, agreed to help, taking in 2 of the puppies herself, while James took the rest, along with their mother, whom he named Hope. Word of their incredible rescue spread throughout Maplewood. Neighbors pitched in, donating food, blankets, and even helping set up a cozy space in James's backyard for the growing pup. Even Mrs. Parker, the grumpy old lady who always scolded kids for stepping on her lawn, showed up one day with a bag of dog treats and a rare smile. A lesson in loyalty and love. Months passed, and the once shaggy, exhausted stray blossomed into a healthy, happy dog. Her puppies, now full of energy, ran around James's yard, barking, playing, and filling his home with laughter. James, once a quiet man who spent his days alone, now had a family one he never expected. And every time he saw Hope sitting by his side, looking up at him with those wise, grateful eyes, he was reminded of the day he had almost walked away from the mystery of the storm drain. If he had ignored it, if he had thought someone else would take care of it, those puppies might not have survived. Sometimes, the greatest acts of heroism come in the quietest moments in stopping, listening, and choosing to care when no one else does. And all it took was one dog, a mother's love, and an old man who decided to listen. James Holloway had always been a man of habit. After retiring from his long career as a carpenter in Maplewood, he had settled into a quiet, predictable life. Every morning, he would drink his coffee on the front porch, exchange pleasantries with his neighbor Margaret, and take a leisurely walk through town. It was on one of these morning walks that he first noticed the stray dog. The dog, a shaggy golden mutt with tired eyes and matted fur, wandered the streets of Maplewood daily. But something about him stood out. Unlike other strays that scavenged for food and followed people for scraps, this one seemed obsessed with a particular storm drain at the edge of town. James watched as the dog sat beside the drain, staring into the darkness below, occasionally whining or pacing around it. At first, he dismissed it. Maybe the dog was just curious. Maybe he had dropped something in there. But when days turned into weeks, and the dog never stopped coming back, James knew something wasn't right. The first clue. One afternoon, James noticed Margaret standing on the sidewalk, watching the dog with a concerned look. "Have you ever seen anything like that?" she asked, nodding toward the mutt, who was once again peering into the storm drain, ears twitching at every sound. James sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Not in all my years. It's like he's waiting for something or someone." Margaret frowned. Or maybe he's lost something down there? James wasn't sure, but his curiosity was growing. That evening, he decided to bring some leftover meat from his dinner and see if the dog would eat. The moment James knelt down with the food, the dog wagged his tail, eyes lighting up with gratitude. But instead of eating right away, he did something strange. He picked up the food in his mouth and carried it straight to the storm drain. James watched, mouth slightly agape, as the dog dropped half of the food into the darkness below before eating his own portion. "Now, why would you do that?" James muttered. Margaret, who'd been watching from her porch, called out, "James, I think we need to open that drain." Uncovering the mystery. The next morning, James grabbed his old toolbox and headed straight to the storm drain. The dog was already there, waiting. When James approached, the dog wagged his tail excitedly, as if he knew help had finally arrived. James knelt down and pressed his ear against the grate. At first, he heard nothing but the faint echo of water dripping below. But then, a weak, barely audible whimper. His breath hitched. "There's something down there." Margaret rushed over, worry etched on her face. "Did you hear that?" James nodded. Without wasting another second, he pried open the rusted grate with his crowbar. The metal groaned in protest before finally popping loose. As soon as the opening was wide enough, James grabbed a flashlight and shone it down into the dark, damp tunnel below. And then, his heart nearly stopped. A shocking discovery. Huddled in the shadows, barely moving, was a tiny puppy, its fur damp, its ribs showing through its thin body. Its eyes blinked weakly, reflecting the beam of the flashlight. "Oh my God," Margaret whispered. James didn't hesitate. "I'm going in." Margaret gasped. "James, you can't! What if the tunnel collapses?" But James had already lowered himself carefully into the drain, heart pounding. The smell of damp concrete and stagnant water filled his nostrils as he edged closer to the fragile little creature. The puppy let out a soft, pitiful cry, too weak to move. James carefully scooped it up into his arms, cradling it against his chest. As he climbed back up, the stray dog was jumping and barking excitedly, tail wagging furiously. Margaret, eyes brimming with tears, whispered he wasn't looking for food, he was feeding his baby. A mother's love. The moment James placed the tiny, trembling puppy on the sidewalk, the stray dog rushed over, licking it frantically, whining and nudging it with his nose. James and Margaret looked at each other, the realization sinking in. "He's not a stray," James murmured. "He's a father. A new beginning." They immediately rushed the puppy and his loyal father to Dr. Holloway, the town's veterinarian. The vet confirmed that the puppy had been trapped for days, barely surviving thanks to the food his father had been bringing him. "It's a miracle he lasted this long," Dr. Holloway said. "If you hadn't found him today, he wouldn't have made it." James looked down at the father dog, now lying beside his pup, his big brown eyes filled with relief and exhaustion. "Who would abandon them like this?" Margaret murmured, shaking her head. James clenched his jaw. "It doesn't matter now. They're safe." The happiest ending. James couldn't bear the thought of leaving them on the streets. So, he adopted both the father and his puppy. Margaret helped, setting up a cozy little space in James's house for them. And for the first time in what must have been months, the stray dog now named Buddy slept soundly, curled up beside his rescued pup, now named Lucky. The whole town soon heard the story of the dog who never gave up on his baby. Neighbors stopped by with blankets and food, children came to visit, and Buddy and Lucky became beloved members of the community. James, once content in his quiet retirement, found his days filled with joy and purpose. And every evening, as he sat on his porch watching Buddy and Lucky play in the yard, he thought about how easily he could have ignored the dog's strange behavior, how he could have walked away like everyone else. But he didn't. And because of that, a father was reunited with his son. Some people believe that heroes wear capes, but sometimes heroes walk on four legs, never giving up on the ones they love. And sometimes, all it takes to save a life is to pay attention. A lesson in love, loyalty, and paying attention to the small things in life. Life moves fast. We rush from one task to another, focused on our routines, responsibilities, and personal struggles. In doing so, we often fail to notice the small signs around us, silent cries for help, gestures of love, or even opportunities to make a difference. The story of Buddy, the stray dog who fed the kittens in the storm drain, is more than just a heartwarming tale of animal loyalty. It is a reflection of life itself, a reminder that kindness, persistence, and selflessness are what truly define our humanity. In today's world, many people feel overwhelmed, disconnected, or isolated. The pressures of work, family, and technology create an environment where we walk past each other without truly seeing one another. We are surrounded by countless storm drains in our own lives, situations where someone or something needs our help, but we are often too distracted to notice. These can be as simple as a struggling neighbor who needs a kind word, a lonely friend longing for connection, or even a stray animal seeking food and warmth. The question is, do we pay attention? Do we take the time to act? Buddy, the stray dog, did not hesitate. He had nothing, no home, no family, no comfort, yet he chose to give. Every day, he took the little food he found and shared it, ensuring the tiny kittens had a chance to survive. This act of selflessness teaches us one of life's greatest lessons. You don't need to have much to make a difference. Often, we think that helping others requires great wealth, power, or influence, but in reality, it starts with small, consistent acts of kindness. A stray dog with nothing was able to save 5 lives. Imagine what we can do when we open our hearts. The story also speaks to the importance of not judging others too quickly. The townspeople saw Buddy staring at the drain every day and dismissed him as just another stray, a nuisance to be ignored. It took someone like James, who was willing to ask questions and pay attention, to uncover the truth. How often do we overlook the deeper stories behind people's actions? The quiet student who sits alone at lunch, the coworker who always leaves early, the elderly neighbor who never comes outside. What if there is something more beneath the surface? Just like Buddy, sometimes people cannot express their struggles in words, but they leave subtle clues. The greatest gift we can give is our attention, our patience, and our willingness to understand. Additionally, the story reinforces the power of second chances. Buddy was a stray homeless, forgotten, and easily ignored. But by showing his unwavering love and loyalty, he proved that every being, no matter their past, deserves a home, love, and a place to belong. The same applies to people. Too often, we label others based on their past mistakes or struggles, forgetting that everyone has the potential to grow, change, and do something incredible. Whether it's giving someone a second chance in life, in a career, or in love, compassion is what transforms lives. Lastly, the story reminds us that heroes come in all forms. Society celebrates grand achievements, yet true heroism is often found in the simplest of actions: the mother who sacrifices everything for her children, the teacher who believes in a struggling student, the person who offers a stranger a meal. Buddy didn't seek recognition, praise, or reward. He just did what was right because it was right. What if we all lived this way? What if we gave, not for attention, but simply because we could? The world would be a much kinder place. In the end, Buddy's story is our story. It reminds us to pay attention, to care deeply, and to act selflessly. It shows us that love and kindness do not require wealth or status, only a willing heart. It challenges us to ask, who is staring into a storm drain in our lives, waiting for us to notice? Who needs us to be their hero today? And, most importantly, how can we ensure that we don't walk past without looking? Let us know in the comments below if you like comment 1, don't like comment 2. Please subscribe to this channel and leave a like. Share. Love for animals is a wonderful thing. Do you agree? Thank you very much for listening. See you in the next video. Have a nice day.